Hey, me again. I want to talk about reading poetry because it's not that easy. When I was, probably in middle school, I don't know if I was ever taught how to read poetry. Maybe I was, and I was sleeping in class. So I'm hoping that you're not sleeping today. But it's not. You don't read it like you would read prose, which is the opposite of poetry. Prose is what we mostly read, probably like books. Prose. Prose is the opposite of poetry. So you read it a little bit differently. Sometimes the rules change, but what I wanted to do was read a poem with you and show you like at the end of a line and capital letters, they don't mean the same thing as they do in prose. So let's take a look at Langston Hughes poem here. Make it nice and big, and it's short and it's only two stanzas. So let's talk about that first of all. This is one stanza, and this is another stanza. So there are two stanzas. In prose, we have paragraphs that organize thoughts. In poetry, we have stanzas. But just be aware that you can break rules in poetry all the time. So even though I'm explaining this and it works for this poem, might be slightly different for other poems, but this is how it goes. We're not going to talk about metaphor or anything in this poem today. We're just going to talk about how you should read it. So, of course, you have the title Dreams, but then this stanza, when you're reading poetry, don't be too concerned about the capital letters at the beginning of a line. Like every line might begin with a capital letter. What you're looking for is at the end of a line. So most of the time, if there is a period, it works just like in prose. You probably want to pause a little bit. It's a complete thought. We don't have any commas at the end of any of these lines, but if you did, it's almost like a half a period oftentimes. So you might pause for a half a beat or so, but what comes after that comma, it might be connected. So we have two stanzas here with two periods. So basically, I'm going to pretty much read this like one sentence. I'm not going to stop. The same will go for this. And man, as much as I want to talk about some metaphor in here, um, I'm not going to, but we do have two metaphors just before I start. There are two metaphors. At least. Maybe you could argue there are more. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. So that's how you would read that poem. And I think for a lot of people beginning to read poetry, you might have the tendency to like stop at the end of a line because this is a capital letter. But I think I did a pretty good job in reading that poem. Hope you enjoyed it. And another thing about poems, though, is that the author, to write that, I mean, it's not always, but a poem is often like a chapter in a book. Even though it's kind of short, that's what I tell myself oftentimes. The poet probably spent a lot of time, Langston Hughes in this case, probably spent a lot of time getting each word just like perfect to have that flow, that rhythm, that meter of the poem work so well. So it took him a long time probably to write it. I don't know, maybe, sometimes with I think of them as songs as well. Sometimes a song will just come to a musician or whatever, and they can write it really quickly. But don't think because that's short that you can read it once and be like, oh, I get it. Yeah, nice. I mean, sometimes with poems you can, but poems are often meant to be read over and over again, something you probably don't want to hear. But yeah, poems are meant to be read over and over again because they're often really thick with meaning. Like I said, each word, I think of it like a brick in a wall too. Like each brick has to be placed there perfectly or the whole wall is going to fall down. And that's often the case with poems that the poet took a lot of time getting each word correct, like right down to the syllable. So, hope that helped shed a little bit of light on reading poems. Don't worry if you don't understand like the first time. This takes quite a bit of time to get used to. And even for me, like when I look at a poem the first time I read it through, it might be just trying to understand the way it works, the way the meter, the little different beats of the poem work. So sometimes that first read through is just trying to get an idea of how things work. So that I thought that poem was pretty straightforward, which is why I wanted to start with it. But yeah, poems are meant to be read many times and possibly throughout your life. So if you read a certain poem at age 13 and then you revisit it at 20 or age 30, the poem, just like songs, just like books, just like anything, it can have a different meaning to you, depending on what you're going through in life. All right. Hope this was helpful. See ya.